Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we go through the sources, pull out the key bits of knowledge, and, well, bring those insights right to you.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're really digging into a case that stretches back almost 80 years. It sort of combines the heartbreak of post-war Britain with some incredibly modern forensic science.
We're talking about the 1946 murder of 12-year-old Muriel Drinkwater.
That's the one. Happened in Carmarthenshire in Wales.
Right, and it picked up this really dramatic nickname, the Little Red Riding Hood murder. It's actually one of the oldest active cold cases the UK police are still investigating.
And the sources suggest there's a reason for that persistence, right? They think they might be close.
That's the strong implication, yes.
Yeah.
They seem to believe an answer is within reach.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack how this case has evolved from that, huge manhunt back in 46 all the way to the microscopic DNA work happening now.
It's quite a contrast, the sheer scale of the initial search versus the tiny details that matter today.
Exactly. Okay, let's get into it.
All right, so to really get it, you need to picture Wales in 1946, just after the war. Muriel Joan Drinkwater, she was the youngest of 4 daughters, lived on a place called Tyldew Farm.
Okay.
The day it happened was June 27th. Muriel was walking home from Gowerton Grammar School. It wasn't a long wash, maybe a mile. It involved a path that went through some local woods.
Just a normal walk home from school, but through woods. You can see why the press might have jumped on that Little Red Riding Hood angle later.
Absolutely. The woods actually bordered their farm. Now, her mother saw her go into the trees on the path, but she never saw her come out the other side.
Oh, that's chilling.
Yeah. And the last person officially noted as seeing her alive was a local boy. He was 13, Hubert Hoyles. He just bought some eggs at the farm and passed her on his way back.
So when Muriel didn't come home, that's when the alarm went up. Must have absolutely terrified the community, especially right after the war years.
Devastating. Completely devastating. The search started, and the next day, a police inspector found her body deep inside those woods near Penelagere, Swansea.
And the details were brutal.
Very. She'd been sexually assaulted, badly beaten around the head, and then shot twice in the chest. It wasn't random. It felt planned, savage.
But the police did get a bit of physical evidence almost immediately, didn't they? The gun?
They did, yes. That was crucial early on. They found one of the murder weapons, a Colt .45 pistol, but an old one from the World War I era.
Right.
And the investigation that kicked off right then in 1946, it was intense, just spectacular for its time. It showed the police knew straight away this was huge.
And they brought in some unusual help too, I read. Bomb disposal teams.
Yes, that's what's fascinating. The 169th Bomb Disposal Unit.
Why bomb disposal? They weren't looking for explosives.
No. But these guys had the gear. Specifically, metal detectors. They were brought in to search the woods, hoping to find a suspected second weapon.
Ah, okay. Did they find it?
No, never located. But think about it, bringing in ordnance experts plus top detectives from Scotland Yard, all converging on this one case in rural Wales. It shows the level of resources poured in from day one.
It really does. And the manhunt itself. The sources mention interviewing 20,000 men. That sounds almost unbelievable for 1946. How did they even manage that?
It was an incredible effort. They literally visited every single house within a 150 square mile radius. Imagine the logistics. No computers, basic communication, people moving around after the war.
It's just pounding the pavement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interviewing 20,000 men across Swansea, Aberdare, Carmarthenshire. It must have been exhausting. Politically tricky, too, I imagine.
And they had a description they were working from.
They did. A man, about 30 years old, described as having thick, fluffy hair, wearing brown corduroy trousers, and a light brown sports jacket. Pretty specific, but also maybe quite common.
Could be many people. But they also had that very specific gun. What was so unusual about the Colt .45 they found?
Well, it wasn't just its age. It had been modified. It was a U.S. Army issue pistol, which immediately pointed towards American GIs who'd been stationed nearby in Penelagere during the war.
Okay, so a possible American connection.
But here's the modification. The grips, the stocks beside the handle, usually wood on those models. These have been replaced with clear perspex.
Perspex, like plastic.
Exactly, a clear plastic. This detail was so unusual, it actually led them to appeal directly to the American public. They thought maybe the killer was a serviceman or someone who got the gun from one.
That perspex modification, it feels significant. Does it hint at anything about the killer? Maybe someone who liked tinkering with guns?
Well,
Collector?
that's a really sharp observation. It does suggest something, doesn't it? Either someone quite interested in firearms, maybe customizing them, or perhaps maybe someone trying to make the gun less identifiable, removing the standard military grips.
Oh,
It
interesting.
gives you a very early sort of potential insight into the killer's mindset. Methodical, perhaps, interested
Yeah.
in weapons. But even with all that detail, the trail eventually just went cold for decades.
Yeah. And the difficulty of tracing someone back then really highlights the contrast with today, which brings us to the modern era of the investigation. So the case gets reopened in 2003, but trying to get DNA off that gun after all that time and handling, it didn't work out.
No, unfortunately not. Too many people had touched it over, what, nearly 60 years? Contamination was just too high. And at that point, the general belief was that Muriel's clothes were long gone, destroyed or lost somewhere in storage.
What would have held the best chance for forensic evidence?
Exactly. But then something pretty amazing happens. Call it perseverance, maybe a bit of luck.
This is the 2008 discovery.
Yes. A team of retired detectives, apparently just looking back into the case files, maybe out of dedication, they found them. Muriel's clothes.
Wow. After all that time.
Her blue coat, her school uniform, her underwear,
Yeah.
all carefully wrapped in an old paper bag, tucked away in storage somewhere. They'd survived.
Incredible. And there was something specific about the coat, wasn't there? Something the original investigators did.
This is the really stunning part. On the back of her coat, there was a semen stain. Now, it wasn't visible anymore, not to the naked eye. But back in 1946, the investigators had circled its location with a yellow wax crayon.
A yellow crayon mark from 1946 saved the key piece of evidence.
It seemed so. That simple mark, made decades earlier, basically pinpointed the exact spot for modern scientists to target. It preserved the location even after the stain itself faded from view.
That's unbelievable. And they actually managed to get DNA from a sample that old.
They did. It's thought to be possibly the oldest sample ever successfully profiled in a murder case, anywhere in the world. Scientists retrieved a full DNA profile from that tiny area on the coat.
What technique did they use? Was it standard DNA testing?
They used something called YSTR analysis,
Mm-hmm.
which is quite clever because, well, YSTR focuses specifically on the Y chromosome.
The male chromosome.
Exactly, so it tracks the paternal line. This means they weren't just looking for the killer himself in the database. They were looking for his father, his brothers, his sons, any male relatives sharing that paternal lineage.
So it casts a wider net, genealogically speaking.
Precisely. They got a familial DNA profile. The downside, no direct match popped up in the UK's National DNA Database.
Ah, so no quick identification.
No. But there was an immediate and incredibly important consequence of getting that profile. Remember Hubert Hoyles?
The boy who last saw her,
Yeah.
who bought the eggs.
Yes. He was 13 then. He lived his entire life, over 60 years, under this sort of unspoken cloud of suspicion, just because he was the last known person to see her alive.
That must have been terrible.
Unimaginable. But the DNA evidence, it completely cleared him, proved definitively he wasn't the killer.
So that science didn't just point towards a potential killer, it finally gave some peace, some justice, to a man who'd been suspected for decades. Even posthumously, that's powerful.
Absolutely. A really significant outcome right there. So the investigation pressed on. And in 2009, they started looking into a possible link to another case.
Another child murder.
Yes. An 11-year-old girl named Sheila Martin. She was murdered just 10 days after Muriel, but quite far away, about 250 miles, down in Kent.
10 days apart. What was the connection other than the timing?
Both girls were killed in woods, quite close to their homes within about half a mile. The similarities were striking enough to investigate.
Okay. And this is where a name that often comes up in Welsh true crime circles enters the picture, isn't it? Harold Jones.
That's right. Harold Jones was a notorious Welsh child killer from an earlier period. A true crime author, Neil Milkins, strongly pushed the theory that Jones was responsible for both murders, Muriel Drinkwater and Sheila Martin.
And on the surface, it kind of made a grim sort of sense historically. A known child killer active in Wales.
It was a compelling theory for many years. It fit a pattern,
Yeah.
But this is where that DNA profile becomes absolutely critical again. Investigators didn't need to rely on theories or circumstantial connections anymore.
They had the science.
Exactly. And in 2019, South Wales police made a very clear announcement. They'd run forensic tests comparing the DNA profile from Muriel's coat against Jones. The result was definitive. They stated it categorically confirms that Jones was not responsible for the murder of Muriel Drinkwater.
Wow. So modern science just completely debunked a long-held theory, eliminated probably the most prominent suspect?
Monumental. It really shows how forensics can correct the historical record,
Hmm.
you know, move past profiles that fit psychologically but just don't match the physical evidence.
So Jones was out. That must have refocused the investigation significantly. Where did the attention turn next?
Much closer to home, actually. In 2020, there was a BBC documentary, Darkland, Hunting the Killers,
Right, I remember that.
and it raised another potential person of interest, a man named Ronnie Harries.
Ronnie Harries, he was executed, wasn't he, for another crime entirely?
He was hanged in 1954 for the double murder of a couple named John and Phoebe Harries. Now, the really critical link suggested by the source material for the documentary was evidence that Ronnie Harries was actually working for Muriel's father, John Drinkwater, right around the time Muriel was killed.
Employed by the family.
That's the connection suggested. So suddenly, the focus shifts dramatically, away from a known serial killer like Jones, operating maybe across regions, to someone potentially local, known to the family, part of their daily lives.
That changes the dynamic completely.
It really does.
Okay, so let's recap where we are. The police have this unique familial DNA profile. They've ruled out the most famous suspect, Harold Jones. And now the focus seems to be narrowing towards people who had direct connections to the Drinkwater family farm back in 1946.
That seems to be the trajectory, yes.
And yet officially the case is still open, unsolved.
Correct. And that leads us to perhaps the most unusual aspect of this whole case today, the secrecy.
What do you mean?
Well, in 2010, something quite extraordinary happened. The Lord Chancellor's Advisory Council on National Records and Archives, basically the body that governs access to official records, they closed off public access to the entire Muriel Drinkwater case file.
Completely sealed.
Completely sealed. And this wasn't just a temporary thing. It was done at the specific request of Scotland Yard.
So if you, our listener, wanted to look into this using, say, a Freedom of Information request or go to the National Archives and Kew, you can't access these files.
Nope. Access denied.
That's unusual, isn't it, for a historical case?
It's very rare. Sealing files like this, often for 75 or 100 years, is usually reserved for things involving ongoing sensitive operations, maybe national security matters. It's a drastic step for a 1946 murder investigation.
Is there a reason given, a justification?
Yes. The official reason provided was that keeping the file secret could actually help the police catch the killer.
How so? What does that imply?
Well, if you connect the dots,
Mm-hmm.
they had the DNA profile line. They know the killer's paternal relatives are out there. Sealing the file suggests they believe crucial information linking that family line to the events of 1946 is in those historical documents.
Like witness statements, original interviews, maybe something about Ronnie Harries or others employed at the farm.
Exactly, and perhaps they are actively monitoring someone or pursuing a lead based on cross-referencing that DNA lineage with the information in those sealed files.
Right.
Making it public could tip off the person or family they're investigating.
So the secrecy isn't just bureaucratic, it's an active investigative strategy. They think the answer is literally locked in that archive box, and they don't want anyone else seeing it while they work.
That feels like the only logical interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just passively waiting for a database hit anymore. They seem to be actively working a very specific angle, likely connecting that unique YSTR profile to the historical context documented in those files.
The weight of that decision, it suggests they feel genuinely close. They're protecting a live lead even after almost 80 years.
It certainly seems that way.
This whole story is just incredible. You've got the sheer scale of that 1946 investigation, all that manpower, meeting the absolute precision of 21st century forensic science. And we've seen how one tiny piece of evidence, that yellow crayon mark on a coat, survived against all odds. How it managed to clear an innocent man and definitively rule out a major suspect decades later.
While also narrowing the focus right down, possibly to the family's immediate circle.
Right. So what's the takeaway here for you listening to this? I think it's proof that a case, no matter how old, is never truly cold as long as something survives, even the smallest detail.
Absolutely. The case is still officially unsolved. But as we've discussed, the sources, particularly the actions around sealing the files, strongly suggest the police believe a breakthrough is possible, maybe even probable. They have this unique DNA profile identifying a family line, but no match in the national database.
So they can't just look up a name.
No. So thinking about that, here's something to consider. Given they have this familial profile, but no database hit, what specific methods beyond that database search might they be using right now? Think about things like commercial genealogy databases, Maybe social media mapping of family trees, perhaps even very targeted surveillance. What does it actually take to connect that profile to a name and close a case this cold, especially when the authorities seem convinced the final clues are hidden in those files they've deliberately locked away? That ongoing hidden investigation. That's the real cliffhanger here, isn't it? The final chapter in the Muriel Drinkwater story is still being written, just behind closed doors. Precisely. It's a fascinating and deeply poignant deep dive.